It was a powerful and great moment when 18-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse, who had been charged with first-degree intentional homicide, first-degree reckless homicide, and more for simply defending himself against wicked and lawless attackers during a riot in Wisconsin, was found not guilty on all counts.
The defendant will rise and face the jury and hearken to its verdicts.
State of Wisconsin versus Kyle Rittenhouse. As to the first count of the information, Joseph Rosenbaum. We, the jury, find the defendant, Kyle H. Rittenhouse, not guilty. As to the second count of the information, Richard McGinnis, we, the jury, find the defendant, Kyle H. Rittenhouse, not guilty. As to the third count of the information, unknown male, we, the jury, find the defendant, Kyle H. Rittenhouse, not guilty. As to the fourth count of the information, Anthony Huber, we, the jury, find the defendant, Kyle H. Rittenhouse, not guilty. As to the fifth count of the information, Gage Grosskreutz, we, the jury, find the defendant, Kyle H. Rittenhouse, not guilty.
Members of the jury, are these your unanimous verdicts? Is there anyone who does not agree with the verdicts as read?
For those who care about truth and justice, it was a sweet moment, and a small foretaste of what will be experienced by those who find themselves on God's side on Judgment Day. As Jesus says, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for justice, for they shall have their fill." Matthew 5:6. There are many providential aspects of this case. When criminal rioters were burning and destroying businesses in Kenosha, Wisconsin in August of 2020, then 17-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse set out to clean up graffiti and help protect local businesses. He was there in a law-abiding fashion. He also legally carried a weapon, contrary to the almost endless stream of lies perpetuated by the dishonest media about the case.
It's remarkable just how dishonest, how thoroughly and intentionally dishonest the media coverage of the Kyle Rittenhouse story turned out to be. All of it was a lie. Rittenhouse was not a white supremacist. He was never in a militia. He never crossed state lines with a firearm. The protest in Kenosha was not peaceful. It was a riot, chaotic and violent. Many of the rioters, by the way, carried guns. Rittenhouse was hardly alone. Rittenhouse didn't go to Kenosha looking for trouble. His father lived there. Rittenhouse himself worked as a lifeguard in Kenosha. On August 25th of last summer, Rittenhouse went downtown to stand guard over a car lot. Here's the context. The night before, police in Kenosha had done nothing as the mob burned businesses, including another car lot, all the way to the ground. So the business owner needed Kyle Rittenhouse's help. He was looking to a 17-year-old for help, if that gives you some perspective on how bad things were, and he asked for it. As Rittenhouse stood there, rioters threatened his life. Then they attempted to kill him. In the end, Rittenhouse shot 3 attackers as he tried to run to the safety of the police. A number of media outlets claimed the men Rittenhouse shot were black. In fact, all 3 were white, and all 3 had serious criminal records. We could go on. Again, the media coverage was, from beginning to end, a tapestry of lies. If you watched the trial last week, you know that.
They claimed that he was a racist, an aggressor, a murderer. None of it was true. Yet they stirred up and deceived the masses who, being detached from God, were thus detached from reality and truth, even in regard to the basic facts of a secular case such as this.
Kenosha shooter, Kyle Rittenhouse, he murdered 2 people, by the way.
Rittenhouse is basically what you would have had in a school shooter.
Kyle Rittenhouse, the 17-year-old vigilante.
Kyle Rittenhouse, a vigilante.
Kyle Rittenhouse, the armed teenage vigilante.
A 17-year-old vigilante, arguably a domestic terrorist, picked up a rifle, drove to a different state to shoot people.
Kyle Rittenhouse, a guy who's deeply racist, went with weapons to a Black Lives Matter protest looking to get in trouble. He did. He murdered a couple of people.
Rittenhouse, the 17-year-old kid, just running around, shooting and killing protesters.
You see the 17-year-old who was radicalized by Trumpism, took his AR-15 to Kenosha and became a killer.
A white, Trump-supporting, MAGA-loving, Blue Lives Matter social media partisan, 17 years old, picks up a gun, drives from one state to another with the intent to shoot people.
Since those who truly follow Jesus do not walk in darkness but have the light, John 8:12, the anti-Christian masses are necessarily in the dark. Concerning undisciplined mobs, St. John Chrysostom said, quote, "For accustomed to hear and to speak without stopping to make inquiry, they repeat at random everything which comes in their way, without any regard for the truth of it," end quote. It was an evil mob that got Jesus crucified. After Pilate first said that he wanted to release Jesus, we read that, but with loud shouts they insistently demanded that he be crucified, and their shouts prevailed. Luke 23:23. The devil easily influences and controls mobs because, when people are not rooted in God, they have no real foundation. Consequently, they are easily swayed to the devil's purpose. They are easily moved to repeat lies by the prince of the power of the air, that is Satan, the spirit that is now at work in the sons of disobedience, Ephesians 2:2. Hence, godless leftists repeated the same message about Kyle Rittenhouse on social media, without concern for the true facts of the case. I want to live in a country where Colin Kaepernick is seen as a hero and Kyle Rittenhouse is seen as a terrorist. I want to live in a country where Colin Kaepernick is seen as a hero and Kyle Rittenhouse is seen as a terrorist. Like zombies, they repeated what was contrary to justice, because they were dominated and moved by the prince of the power of the air. Rittenhouse showed up in downtown Wisconsin that night in a law-abiding fashion to attempt to counteract the criminality. In that sense and in that instance, he represented the law that should have been enforced by the police, but in this increasingly wicked society, the defense of private property was left to a 17-year-old and those with him. The rioters who attacked Rittenhouse represented the lawless. As we've mentioned before, sin is lawlessness, 1 John 3:4. Thus, those who are of the devil promote and defend lawlessness. This is the reason that the left so hated Rittenhouse in this case, while it defended and sympathized with rioters. Every true law is a certain finite reflection of God's eternal law. St. Robert Bellarmine, quote, "Neither is anything at all a true law unless it is a certain shadow and participation of the eternal law," end quote. Since the left hates God, it despises legitimate human laws and those who attempt to enforce them. The first person Kyle Rittenhouse shot in clear self-defense, as the video proves, was Joseph Rosenbaum. The media wrongly called Rosenbaum a victim. Some even called him a hero, but he was a criminal and the attacker. Rosenbaum was a convicted sex offender who had been charged by a grand jury with 11 counts of child molestation and inappropriate sexual activity around children, including anal rape. The victims were 5 boys ranging in age from 9 to 11 years old. Rosenbaum was a pedophile and a sodomite. In July 2020, he had also assaulted his girlfriend. On the night he was killed, he was seen on video pushing a flaming dumpster toward a gas station. When others put out the fire, he wanted to fight. He had threatened to kill Rittenhouse earlier in the night. He was later seen throwing a bag at Rittenhouse and aggressively chasing him. Since he symbolized the lawless on that night, it makes sense that Rosenbaum was a convicted criminal engaged in criminal activity during the incident. It's also not just a coincidence in our view that Rosenbaum was a sodomite and a sexual pervert, for the lawlessness and injustice that is currently plaguing America is directly connected to the widespread acceptance of those kinds of sins and sexual sins in general, as we mentioned in our video, America's Fall to Communism. Of the 4 shots that Rittenhouse fired at Rosenbaum in self-defense, fittingly one hit the pedophile Rosenbaum in the groin. In a further example of how things are upside down, Rosenbaum, who was allegedly downtown to protest for Black Lives Matter, was seen on video repeatedly acting in a racist fashion, using the N-word over and over again.
Shoot me! Shoot me! Bust on me! For real!
Thus, Rosenbaum was the criminal, a racist, and a pedophile, yet the demonically deluded masses and the horribly corrupt media defended him as they portrayed Rittenhouse as the racist and the criminal.
Kyle Rittenhouse, a guy who's deeply racist.
Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Isaiah 5:20. Due to his sex offender status, Joseph Rosenbaum was not allowed to have contact with the 17-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse. Yet he was chasing him in an attempt to make violent contact.
Once he got to the riot, Rosenbaum saw Kyle Rittenhouse and immediately threatened to kill him. Rosenbaum then chased Rittenhouse and tried to pull the gun from his hands. When he did that, Kyle Rittenhouse shot him. So Joseph Rosenbaum died as he had lived, trying to touch an unwilling minor.
Besides his general criminality, perhaps the fact that Rosenbaum was a sexual pervert especially endeared him to the media and to leftists, who are obsessed with normalizing and promoting such abominations. Romans 1:18, "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth." Rosenbaum also repeatedly said, "Shoot me." That's a reflection of how the wicked ultimately bring down destruction and damnation upon themselves. After Rittenhouse defended himself against Rosenbaum, he made a call and then moved away in a non-threatening fashion, but he was pursued by the mob, urged on by one man's shout to "get him." A young man reached Rittenhouse and punched him in the head. Kyle did not shoot. He continued to run but then fell to the ground. He was now on the ground surrounded by a mob of rioters. In other cases, people in such a predicament have been beaten to death. Rittenhouse recognized that he was in great danger. One man tried to jump kick Rittenhouse, while multiple attackers moved in like a pack of demons desperate to extinguish any trace of the law. Anthony Huber hit Rittenhouse with a skateboard and grabbed the rifle. Rittenhouse fired a shot that killed Huber. It makes sense that Huber, who also represented the lawless on that day, was also a convicted criminal. He was a repeated domestic abuser who committed various crimes, including a strangulation/suffocation charge and false imprisonment. Among other crimes, Huber had threatened to gut his brother like a pig while holding a butcher's knife to his stomach. Like the pedophile Rosenbaum, the left was quick to take up Huber's cause, as they condemned and lied about Rittenhouse. Some claim that Huber wasn't really a serious threat to Rittenhouse, for according to them, he was merely attacking him with a skateboard. Putting aside the fact that Huber also went for the gun, people can be killed with a skateboard.
Tragedy inside Santa Ana Starbucks, where one man died after being assaulted by another man with a skateboard. Orange County Bureau Chief Eileen Frere is live in Santa Ana with more on this deadly attack.
Interestingly, as Rosenbaum, the pervert and pedophile, was shot in the groin, Huber, who had been guilty of suffocation in another incident, was killed by a shot that hit his lung. After Rittenhouse neutralized Huber in self-defense, Gage Grosskreutz, who was running toward Rittenhouse with a gun, paused and put his hands up. Since Gage stopped his pursuit, Rittenhouse did not shoot. This was more proof that Rittenhouse was not the aggressor. But then, possessed by the spirit of lawlessness, Gage lunged toward Rittenhouse with a gun in his hand. In response, Rittenhouse justly shot, vaporizing Gage's right biceps. It makes sense that Gage, who also represented the lawless on that day, was a convicted criminal with a lengthy record including burglary, drunk driving, and a domestic incident. Around 2012, he was hit with a felony burglary charge. In 2010, he was charged for hitting his grandmother in the face. Just days before the Rittenhouse incident, he was arrested by cops for allegedly prowling. Is it just a coincidence that all three of the men Rittenhouse shot had documented criminal records and a history of violent behavior? No, not at all. God allowed this incident to serve as a symbol or a microcosm of what's happening in American society at large. As Rosenbaum, the pedophile, was shot in the groin, and Huber, the suffocator, was shot in the lung, Gage, the thief, was shot in his arm, the arm in which he was holding the gun. It's absolutely providential that so many of the key moments of this incident were caught on video. If that had not been the case, Rittenhouse probably would have been convicted, even though he was not guilty. In fact, during the trial, Gage made a crucial admission that further proved Rittenhouse acted in self-defense.
The defense, proved that got Grosskreutz to admit that Rittenhouse did not fire at him until he lowered his hands and pointed the gun.
Eyewitness video from the scene shows as more people approached Kyle Rittenhouse, he was knocked to the ground. Grosskreutz was roughly 5 feet away with his Glock pistol in his right hand and his cell phone in his left. At first, his hands were raised. But on cross-examination, the defense went through the video again, at times second by second.
When you were standing 3 to 5 feet from him with your arms up in the air, he never fired, right?
Correct.
It wasn't until you pointed your gun at him, advanced on him, with your gun, now your hands down, pointed at him, that he fired, right?
Correct.
Instead of accepting facts like these, the corrupt and evil prosecutor was devastated that the truth came out in court. It was also remarkable that Rittenhouse, during the chaos and during an event that called for split-second decisions, was able to stop all of his attackers while leaving video evidence that he was merely acting in response to their aggression. In his, the Lord's hand, is the life of every living thing, and the breath of all mankind, Job 12:10. In this incident, God allowed the one who was trying to uphold the law to live, and the lawless to be stopped. And even though Kyle Rittenhouse was correctly found not guilty on all counts, he should have never been charged. And the struggle to prove his innocence and correct the lies of the mob, the media, and the masses reflects how, in an increasingly godless and anti-Christian society, in which God allows wickedness and injustice to abound because of men's sins and apostasy, it is becoming more and more difficult to get the truth out or obtain a just result. For more crucial information about God's one true faith and the state of the world, see our websites vaticancatholic.com and endtimes.video. You shall not follow the multitude to do evil, nor shall you yield in judgment to the opinion of the most part, to stray from the truth. Exodus 23:2.